Don't you want to try the coffee I made especially for you, honey? Ethan's voice was soft, casual, but something in his smile felt wrong. The kind of smile you learn to notice after years of learning not to flinch when something doesn't sit right. We were at his sister Charlotte's elegant home in Westlake Hills, just outside Austin. She hosted these monthly brunches like a ritual: polished silverware, overpriced florals, and always her passive-aggressive hospitality. The porcelain cup in front of me steamed gently. The smell was sharp, strangely metallic, not quite bitter, not quite right. My name is Isabel Moore, and at 31, I never imagined I'd be wondering whether the man I married and his sister were trying to poison me. But after 3 years of odd illnesses, conveniently timed mishaps, and long nights in urgent care, I'd learned to be cautious, especially around Charlotte. She had a way of smiling while cutting you down, sometimes with words, sometimes, I was beginning to believe, with something much worse. Ethan slid the cup closer. "I've been practicing my brewing skills just for you," he said. Across the table, Charlotte stirred her own untouched coffee with slow precision. "He's become quite the barista lately," she added, her voice sugary sweet. "All these pour-overs and cold brews. He's been obsessed." Her eyes met mine, flat and expectant. "It's a little romantic, don't you think?" The way she emphasized "for you" made my stomach twist. I forced a smile. How thoughtful. In truth, I was stalling. The scent of the coffee was bringing back memories. Memories of the last time I ended up in the ER after drinking tea in this same house. Charlotte had claimed she made it the same way she always did. Doctors couldn't identify what was in my system. Ethan had said I must have had a bad reaction to stress. They always had an explanation. Always plausible. Always just enough to cast doubt. I wrapped my fingers around the cup, pretending to lift it for a sip. Ethan and Charlotte exchanged a quick glance. That glance was all I needed. "Oh, would you look at that?" I said brightly, glancing at my phone. "Quick message from work. Charlotte, do you mind if I use your study?" She blinked. "Of course. Just try not to spill anything on the rug." As I walked past her, I stumbled, deliberately, catching the table slightly and knocking our cups together. "Oh my gosh, I'm such a klutz," I said, steadying myself. Charlotte laughed a little too tightly. "Careful now." "I've got it," I replied, gently righting the cups. But in that moment, I switched them, hers for mine for hers. Inside the study, I slipped behind the door, barely breathing. From the shadows, I had a direct line of sight into the dining room. I watched as Charlotte lifted her cup, now the one Ethan had originally given to me, and took a sip. I felt my heart pound against my ribs. Part of me wanted to stop her. But the other part, the one that had woken up sick for the 3rd time in 2 months after meals made by them, the one who'd sat through board meetings dizzy and nauseous, needed to know. Ethan, seated across from her, looked relaxed. Too relaxed. Then, a tremor. Subtle. Barely noticeable. Charlotte set the cup down. Her hand was shaking. "Ethan," she murmured, her voice uncertain. "Something's wrong." He looked up, confused, then horrified. That wasn't your cup," he whispered. I stepped out of the study, phone already recording. "I was wondering when you'd say it." Charlotte's eyes went wide. "You switched them." Charlotte's hands trembled violently now, her skin pale, lips dry. "Call an ambulance," she gasped, gripping the edge of the table. Please, I can't. Something's..." I didn't panic. I'd rehearsed this. 911, I told the dispatcher, my voice calm. "Yes, we need an ambulance at 622 Ridgeview Circle. My sister-in-law is having a severe reaction, tremors, confusion. She drank coffee minutes ago and is declining rapidly." Ethan stood frozen, watching Charlotte's body seize in small, erratic spasms. "What did you put in it?" I asked, camera still recording. He looked at me with dread. "It wasn't supposed to be her cup," he mumbled, but the room was silent enough that even a whisper carried. Charlotte collapsed to the floor, gasping. Ethan knelt beside her, helpless. "This is your fault," she snapped between breaths. "You said it was safe, just enough to make her miss the Maxwell pitch." My blood ran cold. The Maxwell pitch. A $3 million client account I'd been prepping for 6 weeks. Charlotte and I worked for rival firms. I'd heard she was bidding on the same project. "Just make her sick," Charlotte said through clenched teeth. "You promised." "I thought you said you loved me," Ethan blurted. "You idiot," she groaned. "You mixed up the cups." The paramedics arrived within minutes. As they worked on stabilizing Charlotte, I stepped aside to send the recording to my encrypted backup email and to my attorney. Ethan tried to follow the gurney. "I'll ride with her," he told the EMTs. I stepped between them. "No," I said. "She needs real care, and I'll be there to make sure she gets it." His eyes widened. Isabel, please." "You tried to sabotage my career," I said evenly. "You did more than that. You could have killed someone. Maybe you already did. We'll let the toxicology report decide." At the hospital, I sat in the waiting room while they pumped Charlotte's stomach and ran a full panel of tests. My phone vibrated with a reply from my lawyer. "Received. Save everything. I'll contact the authorities." A nurse approached. "Family of Charlotte Moore?" "I'm her sister-in-law. She's stable, but the toxicology is concerning. The attending physician would like to speak with you." As I stood to follow her, I noticed Ethan hadn't shown up. And I didn't expect he would. Cowards rarely do. As I followed the nurse through the sterile hallways of Austin General, I felt the weight of every lie that had led to this moment. Charlotte Moore, once a trusted sister-in-law, once a colleague I shared ideas and holiday meals with, was now lying in a hospital bed, shaking from a dose of whatever she and my husband Ethan had meant for me. My steps slowed outside her room. What kind of people orchestrate something like this? And worse? How long had they been doing it? The answer, if I was being honest with myself, had been in front of me for months. It started with small things. A few years ago, when I first met Ethan at a marketing conference in Dallas, he was magnetic, smart, funny, charming in a disarming way. We had a whirlwind courtship, got married within a year, and relocated to Austin, where he rejoined Charlotte's marketing firm. I joined a competing firm, and it worked, at first. Charlotte welcomed me in her way. Dazzling smile, sharp heels, and always just a little too polished. She helped plan our wedding, brought homemade cocktails to our backyard parties, and made sure to comment, always gently, on my ambition. "You're a real go-getter, Isabel," she said once, her eyes scanning my client pitch slides. "Just be careful not to outshine the people around you." At the time, I thought she meant it as a compliment. Now I knew better. The first real warning sign came last spring. I had just landed a major local tech client, Bellstream, after months of negotiation. I was scheduled to pitch them a new rebranding initiative on a Monday morning. That Sunday night, we had dinner at Charlotte's house. "Special recipe lasagna," she said, smiling. By midnight, I was curled up on the bathroom floor, sweating and nauseous. I missed the pitch. Charlotte, kindly, offered to pass my regrets to the Bellstream team. Her firm secured them 2 weeks later. Ethan told me it must have been bad shrimp from the takeout I had the night before. I wanted to believe him. Then there was the tea, just a month ago. I stopped by Charlotte's home office for what was supposed to be a casual catch-up. She offered chamomile with lemon. Within 2 hours, I was in urgent care with tremors and dizziness. Doctors were baffled. No known allergens, no pathogens, no cause. It could be stress, Ethan said that night, brushing my hair back. You've been running so hard lately. Stress. That was his favorite explanation. By the third incident, breakfast at their house after a weekend retreat, I knew better. I started taking notes, dates, times, what I ate, how I felt afterward, what Charlotte served, when Ethan was present, what I overheard. I even began carrying a second phone, just a basic one with a voice recording app and a burner number. I kept it in my purse, recording in the background during brunches, meetings, or even when Ethan left the room while texting. The pieces were falling into place, but I needed proof. And today, I had it. Dr. Reed was waiting outside Charlotte's room. She was a tall woman in her 50s with a calm, steady demeanor and the eyes of someone who didn't miss much. "Mrs. Moore," she said as I approached. "It's still Isabel Bennett professionally," I replied, nodding. She studied me for a moment. "You were with the patient when the symptoms began?" "Yes." "And the coffee?" "I think you should hear this," I said, pulling out my phone. I played the recording. Charlotte's voice. The panic. Ethan's whispered confession. The damning phrase, "It wasn't supposed to be your cup." Dr. Reed's eyes narrowed. "I'll need to make a report." "You'll want to run a toxicology panel. I've been hospitalized before, multiple times. I think this has been going on for months." Back in the waiting area, I sat with my notes, reviewing them line by line. February. Dinner with Charlotte. Upset stomach. Vomiting. Missed work. April. Tea incident. ER visit. June. Breakfast. Dizziness. Fatigue. July. Conference weekend. Shared cocktails. Woke up disoriented. And now, August. The coffee. The door at the end of the hallway opened and Ethan appeared. He looked shaken, disheveled, like a man who finally realized the mask he'd worn was slipping. "Isabel," he said, approaching slowly. "I've been trying to explain. You need to leave," I said, stepping back. "The hospital is investigating. The police will be here soon." "You don't understand," he whispered. "We were just trying to help. You were burning out." Charlotte said what?" I asked coldly. "That if we could just make you slow down," he murmured. "Skip one meeting, miss one pitch. You'd win the account," I finished for him. He looked stunned. It wasn't about that. But it was. It always was. Dr. Reed returned with a nurse and quietly guided me into a private consultation room. "We found something," she said, pulling up a file on her tablet. "There's a compound present in your sister-in-law's blood. It's not a typical toxin. It's a pharmaceutical agent used in neurological research. Restricted access. Not available over the counter." My stomach dropped. "And my past hospitalizations?" I asked. "We'll run tests and compare, but I'd wager you'll find the same compound, just in smaller doses." Ethan tried to follow us in but was stopped by security. "I need to see my wife," he said. "We're married." "You're not helping your case," Dr. Reed warned. "Please remain outside." I turned to the nurse. "Get a hold of Detective Hollis," I said, "and tell her I'm ready to give my full statement." Because for the first time in months, I wasn't afraid anymore. I was prepared. And the truth was finally catching up with them. Charlotte lay in her hospital bed, IV lines running from both arms, monitors quietly tracking her vitals. The strength she was known for, the sharp eyes, the razor-thin smile, was gone. What remained was someone pale, shaking, and finally afraid. I stood in the doorway with Dr. Reed and Detective Hollis, a no-nonsense woman in her early 40s with a military stance and the kind of voice that could command a room with 2 words. Charlotte turned her head toward us. She tried to sit up but winced. "You," she croaked. "Me," I said, stepping into the room. "Surprised I'm still standing?" She didn't respond, just stared. Detective Hollis took a chair, flipped open her notepad, and got right to the point. Ms. Moore, we're collecting statements related to your sudden illness and possible deliberate contamination. I'd like you to tell us what happened at brunch today. Charlotte hesitated, then let out a slow exhale. I didn't mean for it to go that far. But it did, I replied. It always does with you. She looked at me then. Really looked, and for a split second I saw regret, but it vanished. I was only trying to keep you out of that pitch, she said. The Maxwell account. You were never supposed to get it. And that justified drugging me? I didn't drug you, she snapped. I told Ethan to just make you sick, just enough so you'd miss the meeting. Not like this, Detective Hollis wrote quietly. Outside the room, Ethan stood with 2 security guards. He'd been pacing for the last 15 minutes, chewing on the inside of his cheek like a man trying to outrun his conscience. When Hollis exited Charlotte's room and turned her attention to him, he tried to regain his composure. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, he blurted. Charlotte said it would be temporary. Mr. Moore, Hollis said, your sister claims the plan was yours, that you supplied the substance and encouraged her to administer it. That's not true, he said quickly. She had the stuff. You just helped switch my cup, I said, stepping forward. At brunch. You presented it to me with a smile. Ethan swallowed hard. You don't have proof. I opened my phone and tapped a recording. Charlotte's voice. You said it would just make her sick enough to miss the pitch. Ethan's voice. That wasn't supposed to be your cup. He paled as the playback ended. Where did you get the compound? Hollis asked. He didn't answer. I assume it wasn't from a pharmacy, she added. Still silence. Hollis turned to the officer beside her. Get a warrant for his vehicle and home. Search anything connected to his office at Moore and Chase. 2 hours later, they found it. A small container hidden in Ethan's desk drawer at his marketing firm. Clinical labeling. Research-grade compounds. And worse, a notebook. Each entry detailed doses, dates, reactions. March 4th, tea at Charlotte's. Mild dizziness, no hospitalization. April 22nd, brunch. New formula. Result. ER visit, no diagnosis. June 15th, wine spritzer. Ineffective. Increased dose, next attempt. I stared at the photos of the notebook the detective showed me. He'd been documenting it like an experiment, like I was some kind of test subject. Charlotte, meanwhile, was still under observation. She had been given an antidote, but residual effects would linger. Her hands still trembled. Her vision blurred at times. Dr. Reed confirmed what I already knew. She ingested a much stronger concentration today than in prior incidents, she said. If she'd had a full cup, she likely wouldn't have survived. I should have felt something. Anger, vengeance, closure. But what I felt was deeper. Not relief. Not revenge. Clarity. I hadn't imagined it. I wasn't overworked. I wasn't paranoid. They had been trying to remove me from the picture. Not professionally. Physically. Detective Hollis returned to Charlotte's room that evening with more questions. You sourced the compound from a pharmaceutical lab. How? She asked. Charlotte looked at her hands. Ethan had a contact. An old friend from UT. He worked in R&D. Did he tell you what it was? He said it wouldn't kill her. Just make her seem unstable. Late to meetings. Sick. Clients don't like unreliable consultants. I felt the words land in the pit of my stomach. Unreliable. That's what she had called me in a meeting last quarter, in front of one of our shared vendors. I'd believed her then. Now I saw it for what it was. Gaslighting, layered on top of calculated poisoning. Back at home, I opened my backup files, audio recordings, screenshots, photos of texts I'd taken while Ethan was distracted. One message from Charlotte read, "She won't even see it coming. You just have to deliver it right." Another from Ethan. I hate doing this, but it's the only way she'll stop. I forwarded them all to Detective Hollis, and then to my attorney. By midnight, both Charlotte and Ethan had been placed under medical observation and protective custody, pending formal arrest. The next morning, I got a call from my firm's managing partner. Isabel, he said, I'm so sorry to hear what you've been through, but I have some good news. I braced myself. The Maxwell account team was impressed by your proposal. They reached out directly. They've awarded us the contract. There was a beat of silence. They asked that you remain the point of contact going forward. Only you. I exhaled for the first time in what felt like months. I arrived at the Austin Police Department just after 10 a.m., a neat folder tucked under my arm, my backup phone charged and ready. I wasn't just there to answer questions. I was there to make sure no detail of what Ethan and Charlotte had done could ever be buried or misrepresented. Detective Hollis met me at the lobby with a nod. You brought everything? I brought more than they ever expected I'd keep, I replied. She led me into a small interview room. Fluorescent lighting hummed overhead, and the temperature was colder than it needed to be. But I was steady. I'd been waiting for this moment for months, perhaps longer than I realized. I opened the folder and placed it on the table. Inside, logs of every hospital visit I'd had in the last 6 months, printouts of emails Charlotte forwarded accidentally to her firm's clients, subtly undercutting my credibility. Audio transcripts from my recordings, labeled by date, and a complete digital timeline of symptoms matched to meals, drinks, and interactions with them both. Hollis raised an eyebrow as she flipped through the material. You kept all this? I nodded. I had to. The doctors couldn't find answers, but I knew something was wrong. The real gem was the audio files. I played her one from late May, Charlotte's voice recorded during a call she didn't know I'd joined on mute. Ethan, if she gets the Maxwell pitch, we're finished. Clients will follow her. She's too polished now. Too trusted. His reply came a beat later. I'll take care of it. You said that compound makes her shaky and confused, right? She misses a few meetings, maybe fumbles a call. That'll be enough. Another file, this one from 3 weeks ago. Charlotte again. We need her out of the game, just a few days, enough to make her look inconsistent. They didn't realize their casual cruelty would become evidence. Detective Hollis sat back, her pen stilled. This isn't just sabotage, she said. This is attempted systemic dismantling of your health, your credibility, your career. And they were careful, I added. Calculated. I think Charlotte saw me as a threat the moment she realized I wasn't just Ethan's wife, I was competition. She nodded slowly. We already found controlled substances in Ethan's office, but these recordings, this changes the scope. They were planning, coordinating. She left to brief her team and returned 20 minutes later with a forensic tech. We're issuing full warrants on both residences, plus the pharmaceutical connection. There's enough to push this beyond assault and into conspiracy charges. At home, I kept my phone close, waiting for the update I knew would come. By 2 p.m., Hollis called. We found additional vials, hidden in Charlotte's garage, labeled and stored with insulation packs. She kept a dosage log in her handwriting. My throat tightened. How many entries? 13, Hollis said. 12 of them match the dates you logged for your illness. And the 13th? Today's date. Your name. 1 dose listed as final attempt. I closed my eyes. That night, I sat at my desk reviewing proposals for the Maxwell account. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt exhausted. It wasn't just the relief that they'd finally be held accountable. It was the grief of realizing how long I'd ignored what was in front of me. Love had made me second-guess my instincts. Family had made me hesitate, but not anymore. The next morning, I got the call I didn't expect but knew was inevitable. Charlotte had confessed, partially. She's trying to make a deal, Hollis told me. She's painting herself as the reluctant accomplice, blaming Ethan for the dosages and the escalation. Are you buying it? No, Hollis said. The dosage logs are in her hand, the emails, the recordings. And we pulled her fingerprints off the coffee cup. Then what's the deal? She's hoping for reduced sentencing, but based on your recordings and the hospital's toxicology, we're pushing for maximum charges. Good. Because for once, consequences had found them. Later that day, I received an email from my firm's senior partner, Isabel. We've decided to appoint you as lead on all current and future accounts tied to Maxwell. The client specifically asked for you. You've handled everything with professionalism that's beyond commendable. Let's discuss your promotion to Senior VP next week. I stared at the message for a long time. It wasn't just a win. It was vindication. I hadn't just survived what they did to me. I documented it, confronted it. And now, I was building something better in its place. Not just a career, a legacy. The trial began on a warm Monday morning in early November. It had been just over 3 months since the brunch at Charlotte's home. 3 months since I switched the coffee cups and exposed the plot meant to unravel my life. Enough time for the shock to fade, but not the betrayal. I arrived at the Travis County Courthouse wearing navy, calm, composed, unshakable. Ethan and Charlotte sat across the aisle from me at the defense table. Neither looked the way they used to. Ethan's once confident posture had shrunk into something almost apologetic. Charlotte no longer wore the crisp elegance she was known for. Now she looked more like someone clinging to the last scraps of control. They wouldn't meet my eyes. That was fine. I didn't come here for them. I came for the truth. The prosecution opened with a phrase I would never forget. This was not an accident. It was a campaign. Deliberate, documented, and dangerous. Then came the evidence. They presented the notebook from Ethan's office first. Dosages, symptoms, Isabel's reactions, notes in his handwriting. Then the recordings. My recordings, carefully edited into short, clear clips. Charlotte's voice, just make her too sick to show up. It doesn't have to be permanent, just enough to derail her. Ethan's reply, she'll bounce back eventually, it's for the best. I sat still, hands folded, my expression unreadable. But inside, I felt something shift. For months, I'd carried the weight of doubt. Even with proof, part of me feared no one would believe it was real, that two people could be so calculating. But the courtroom believed it. They heard the words. They saw the plan. Dr. Reed testified next. She spoke plainly about the toxic compounds used in the coffee and in my previous meals. The chemicals weren't just dangerous. They were controlled substances, stolen from a pharmaceutical lab by a contact Ethan had manipulated. Isabel Bennett could have died, Dr. Reed said. The dose found in the coffee cup she was intended to drink was 5 times higher than in any previous incident. Ethan looked down at the table. Charlotte stared blankly ahead. Then the defense tried their strategy. Deflection. They argued that Ethan and Charlotte never meant to cause harm, only to create temporary illness. They called it reckless overreach. They claimed it was born out of professional desperation, as if desperation justified poisoning someone. Their attorney tried to suggest that I had exaggerated my symptoms, that I had somehow manipulated the narrative. That's when Detective Hollis took the stand. She laid it out, methodically. The evidence from Ethan's desk. The stolen substances traced to a college contact in biotech. The dosage log in Charlotte's handwriting. The audio files and the matching dates with my hospital records. The motive. Professional jealousy and fear of being overshadowed. There was no room for doubt. When I was called to testify, I walked to the stand with steady steps. The courtroom was silent as I recounted what had happened, beginning with that morning at brunch. I'd suspected something for months, I said. The illnesses always came after meals with Ethan or Charlotte. I'd documented it, recorded what I could, but I had no way to confirm. Until I saw the way they looked at me when I picked up that cup. The prosecutor asked how I stayed so calm that day. I smiled faintly, because I needed the truth, and the only way to get it was to let it show itself. By the end of the second week, the trial had become regional news. Headlines ranged from marketing exec accused in poison plot to coffee cup confession leads to criminal charges. But I stayed focused, because no matter how public the story became, for me, it remained personal. They hadn't just tried to destroy my career, they tried to erase me. In closing arguments, the prosecution's voice rang out clear and final. This was not one mistake. It was a pattern of targeted abuse. Two individuals, both in positions of power, worked together to systematically harm someone who trusted them. And they did it to gain an advantage they didn't earn. The defense's rebuttal was scattered. There was no explanation for the dosage logs, no refutation of the audio, no defense for what had been found in their own handwriting. When the jury returned with their verdict, I didn't hold my breath. I already knew. Guilty, on all counts: conspiracy to commit assault, possession of a controlled substance, attempted poisoning with intent to harm, attempted obstruction of a professional contract. The judge looked directly at Ethan and Charlotte. This court finds your actions premeditated, reckless, and extraordinarily cruel. You abused trust. You endangered a life. And you did so not in self-defense, but in selfish ambition. Sentencing was swift. Ethan, 12 years. Charlotte, 15, due to prior offenses related to misuse of client funds, unrelated but admissible in sentencing. They were let out in cuffs. Ethan glanced at me once. I didn't look away. He had counted on me staying silent. And now, he couldn't even speak. After the trial, I stepped outside into the late afternoon sun. Reporters waited with microphones. I gave one statement. I didn't win today. Justice did. The truth did. I didn't get here alone. My records, my instincts, and my refusal to be intimidated made this possible. If someone out there is doubting themselves like I once did, don't. Trust what you know. And protect yourself. Then I walked away. Not broken, not bitter, just free. 1 year later, I stood at the podium of the Texas Women in Business Summit in downtown Austin. The audience was packed, nearly 500 attendees, mostly women, many in the second half of their careers. Some had known betrayal. Some were rebuilding after job loss, divorce, or professional sabotage. All of them came to hear how I survived what others had planned to destroy me. They called me a keynote speaker. I called it a full-circle moment. The past 12 months had been a whirlwind. After the trial, I took a long break. No press, no work, no conversations I didn't initiate. I traveled to Seattle to stay with my sister for a few weeks. We talked, cooked together, laughed like we hadn't in years. I even took up running again, something I hadn't done since college. I learned to breathe deeply again, to trust silence. When I returned to Austin, I didn't go back to Bennett & Moore. The business I had co-founded was too tainted. Instead, I started something new. More Point Strategies, a boutique consulting firm with one core value: integrity. I took nothing from the old business but my name and my reputation. And that was more than enough. By spring, clients had followed me, dozens of them. They weren't just curious about the scandal. They were drawn to the clarity I offered, the honesty I insisted on, the way I made even the most complex strategy feel human. The Henderson account, the one Ethan and Charlotte had been so desperate to steal, signed a 3-year renewal with me exclusively. Word spread fast in our industry. I hired a small team: Olivia, a financial analyst who'd left a toxic corporate job; Jamal, a tech integration expert whose ideas had been dismissed too often by executives who didn't listen. Daniela, a sharp strategist returning to the workforce after 5 years raising her kids. I didn't just rebuild, I redefined. My first major speaking event was smaller, just 20 women at a local chamber breakfast. I told my story, not just about the coffee, not just about the courtroom, but about the years before that. When I ignored red flags, when I let others take credit, when I convinced myself that loyalty required silence. Afterward, a woman in her 60s pulled me aside. I stayed in a bad business partnership for 10 years longer than I should have, she said. Your story made me realize I'm not alone. That's when I knew the real value of my experience, not in money, not even in justice, but in connection. Back at the summit, the MC introduced me. Please welcome Isabel Moore, founder of Moore Point Strategies and a woman who turned betrayal into boldness. Applause filled the room as I stepped up to the microphone. I took a breath and began. Not long ago, I thought success meant keeping the peace, playing nice, being quiet when someone took credit, saying thank you when I should have said, that was mine. The audience leaned in. And then one day, I realized something. I was fighting harder to protect other people's egos than I was to protect my own worth. I told them about the morning of the switch, the coffee, the recording, the moment it all turned. I told them how justice feels less like triumph and more like calm. I don't tell this story to relive it, I said. I tell it because some of you are sitting in rooms right now, sipping from cups someone else poured, doubting what your gut is telling you. If you remember nothing else, remember this. You are not wrong for noticing. You are not difficult for defending your own brilliance. After the speech, there were handshakes, photos, business cards slipped into my palm. But one woman lingered in the front row, tears brimming in her eyes. She was in her late 50s, with short silver hair and a tailored navy blazer. I almost gave up last year, she said. A partner I trusted pushed me out of our firm. I thought I was too old to start again. But you made me feel like it's not too late. I reached for her hand. It's never too late, I said. Because it wasn't. Not for her. Not for me. Not for anyone brave enough to choose themselves. As I drove home that evening, I thought about Ethan and Charlotte. They were both serving time in 2 separate correctional facilities, each with their own set of lawyers now trying to appeal. But the evidence was too thorough. The verdict wasn't changing. They had lost everything. And yet, I didn't feel satisfaction. Only distance. They were part of a past that no longer defined me. In the quiet of my living room that night, I made tea. A ritual that once brought fear, now reclaimed as mine. I sat on my balcony overlooking downtown Austin, the city lights glowing like quiet promises. On my laptop screen were proposals for 2 new projects, both from clients who had once hired Bennett and Moore but now wanted me alone. I smiled. I didn't need revenge. I had results, and that was far more powerful. Epilogue. I share my story now not as a cautionary tale, but as a mirror. To the woman who's been dismissed in meetings, told to wait her turn, asked to tone it down. This is your sign. To the man who's been quietly sabotaged by someone too afraid of his talent, this is your proof. To anyone who's ever been made to feel small so someone else could feel secure, you're not the problem, you're the solution. So trust your instincts, gather your evidence, and when the moment comes, switch the cup.